Harold Bennett stood in the driveway of what should have been his retirement home, staring at a padlock on the gate and a sold sign written in Thai script. He had been gone for only 5 days, a routine visa run to Vientiane that his 22-year-old wife insisted he take alone. Now, at 68 years old, with his knees aching and his heart pounding against his ribs, Hal realized that the small house he'd purchased 8 months earlier no longer belonged to him. It never had. The property was in her name, the bank account they shared was emptied, and when he called her phone, a recorded message in Thai told him the number was no longer in service. Standing in the tropical heat of rural Udon Thani, surrounded by rice fields and the distant sound of chickens, Hal understood with devastating clarity that the young woman who called him her hero, who cried when he proposed, who promised to care for him in his old age, had erased him from her life as efficiently as one deletes a text message. Everything he had worked for over 4 decades, the business, the house in Tucson, the carefully saved retirement fund was gone, and so was she. Harold Bennett had spent most of his 68 years being invisible, back in Tucson, Arizona, where the desert heat baked the asphalt and life moved at a predictable, unchanging pace. Hal had been just another divorced man nearing 70. His auto body shop, which he'd owned for 32 years, had been sold 6 months after his second divorce was finalized. His ex-wife, Margaret, had taken the house they'd shared for 11 years, and Hal walked away with a settlement that felt more like a severance package than the end of a marriage. He was tired. Tired of the arguing, tired of feeling inadequate, tired of being told he worked too much or cared too little. Margaret had made it clear in their final months together that she found him boring, predictable, and emotionally unavailable. When the divorce was finalized, Hal didn't fight her on anything. He signed the papers, sold the business to a younger competitor, and decided that if he was going to spend his final years alone, he might as well do it somewhere warm, affordable, and far away from the ghost of his failures. His first marriage, to a woman named Linda, had ended 20 years earlier under similar circumstances. She'd called him emotionally distant, said he prioritized work over family, and left him for a high school teacher who wrote her poetry. Hal had thrown himself into the auto shop after that, working 12-hour days, 6 days a week. The work numbed him, gave him purpose, kept him from thinking too much about what he'd lost. But after Margaret left, the numbness turned into something darker. Depression crept in slowly, like water seeping through a crack. Hal would wake up in his small condo and stare at the ceiling, wondering what the point of any of it had been. 2 failed marriages, no children, no close friends, just decades of labor that had earned him a modest retirement fund and nothing else. Thailand had been a dream for years. Hal had read about it online, watched YouTube videos of expats who'd relocated to Chiang Mai and Pattaya, and listened to men in forums talk about the low cost of living, the beautiful landscapes, and the welcoming culture. But there was another element, one that Hal didn't admit to himself until much later, the idea that in Thailand, he might not be invisible anymore. The videos showed older Western men walking hand in hand with young Thai women, smiling at cameras, living lives that seemed infinitely richer than anything Hal had experienced in Arizona. The decision to move came quickly. He sold his small condo, liquidated his retirement accounts, paid off his remaining debts, and boarded a one-way flight to Bangkok with 2 suitcases and approximately $230,000 in his bank account. It was everything he had left, his entire life, reduced to a number on a screen. When Hal stepped off the plane at Suvarnabhumi Airport in late February, he felt something he hadn't felt in years' anticipation. The air was thick and humid, pressing against his skin like a warm blanket. The terminal was massive and modern, filled with travelers from every corner of the world. Signs in Thai script looked like intricate art to him, beautiful and incomprehensible. He took a taxi to Pattaya, a coastal city 2 hours south of Bangkok, where he'd booked a modest apartment near the beach for 6 months. The drive itself was an experience highways, lined with palm trees, billboards advertising beer and hotels, glimpses of Buddhist temples with their golden spires glinting in the sunlight. Pattaya was loud, chaotic, and overwhelming in the best possible way. Motorbikes weaved through traffic with seemingly no regard for lanes or traffic signals. Street vendors lined the sidewalks, selling grilled meat on skewers, fresh fruit cut into perfect slices, and steaming bowls of noodles. Neon lights advertised everything from massage parlors to karaoke bars, and the air smelled like a mixture of exhaust fumes, frying garlic, and the salty ocean breeze. Hal spent his first few weeks walking along Beach Road, eating cheap meals at open-air restaurants, and marveling at how far his money stretched. A plate of pad thai cost less than $3. A beer at a beachfront bar was even cheaper. A full meal with drinks rarely exceeded $10. He could live here comfortably on a fraction of what it cost in Arizona. But more than the affordability, Hal noticed something else. People smiled at him. Waitresses called him Hoon, a polite Thai term of respect. Bartenders asked where he was from and seemed genuinely interested in his answers. Women, young, beautiful women, waved at him as he walked past bars, inviting him to sit down for a drink. Shop owners greeted him warmly, and even strangers on the street would nod and say "Sawadee crap" as they passed. For the first time in decades, Hal Bennett didn't feel invisible. He felt seen, he felt wanted, and that feeling, intoxicating and dangerous, began to reshape his understanding of what his life could be. Call to action. If you're finding this story as shocking as we did while researching it, please subscribe to our channel for more true crime and love scam documentaries from Southeast Asia. These stories need to be told, and they could save someone from making the same devastating mistakes. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Hal met Sudha Warasiri on his third week in Pattaya. It was a Friday evening, and he'd decided to walk along Walking Street, the city's infamous strip of bars, clubs, and entertainment venues that came alive after dark. The street pulsed with music from competing sound systems, the bass vibrating through the pavement. Neon signs in English, Thai, Russian, and Chinese advertised everything imaginable. Women in tight dresses stood outside clubs, calling to passing tourists. The air smelled like barbecue smoke, cheap cologne, and spilled beer. Hal felt both fascinated and slightly overwhelmed by the energy, but he was curious. He wanted to see what everyone talked about, wanted to understand this world that seemed so foreign and yet strangely welcoming. He stopped at a beachfront bar called Blue Lagoon, a small open-air establishment with plastic chairs arranged around low tables, a modest bar counter with bottles of whiskey and rum lined up behind it, and a view of the dark ocean beyond. String lights hung overhead, casting a warm glow over everything. The place wasn't crowded yet, just a handful of tourists scattered at different tables, and a few Thai women working behind the bar and mingling with customers. That's when he saw her. Sudha was 22 years old, petite and slender, with long black hair that fell past her shoulders in glossy waves. Her skin was smooth and sun-kissed, her features delicate. She wore a simple white tank top and denim shorts that showed off her legs, and she moved with an easy confidence as she delivered drinks to a table of older European men. When she turned and caught Hal's eye, she waved him over with a playful gesture, her smile bright and genuine. "You? Alone?" she called out in accented English, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of music and conversation. Hal hesitated for a moment, then smiled and walked toward the bar. "Yeah, just me tonight." "Sit, sit." She patted the stool next to her with enthusiasm, then leaned on the counter with a grin that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. "What you want drink?" "Just a beer, Leo, if you have it." She laughed, a bright, musical sound that made Hal feel instantly more comfortable. "Of course have. This Thailand, Leo #1. She popped open a cold bottle with practiced ease and slid it across the counter, the condensation already forming on the glass. "You knew Pattaya?" Hal nodded, taking a sip. The beer was crisp and refreshing in the humid evening air. "I've been here about 3 weeks. Retired from America." Her eyes widened with what seemed like genuine interest and excitement. "America? Wow, you rich man." Hal chuckled, shaking his head. The assumption made him slightly uncomfortable, but also flattered. "Not rich, just comfortable." "You look young for retire," she said, tilting her head and studying him with an appraising look. "Maybe 60? Hal felt a warm flush of flattery spread through his chest. No one in Arizona would have guessed he was younger than his years. 68, actually. "No, I not believe." She reached out and lightly touched his arm, a gesture that felt both innocent and intimate, her fingers warm against his skin. "You look strong, like my papa." It was a strange comparison, but somehow it didn't feel offensive. In fact, it felt endearing. She started calling him Papa Hal from that moment on, laughing every time she said it, turning it into a term of affection rather than an observation about their age difference. Over the course of that evening, Sudha sat with him between serving other customers. She would jump up when someone needed a drink, deliver it with a smile, then return to Hal's side as if he were the only person in the bar who mattered. She asked about his life, his family, why he came to Thailand. Her questions felt personal but not invasive, curious but not probing. She told him she was from Khon Kaen, a city in northeastern Thailand known as Isan, one of the poorer regions of the country. She explained that she was studying tourism at a local university, working toward a degree that would help her get a job at a hotel or travel agency someday. The bar work, she explained with a slight shrug and a sheepish smile, was just to help pay for school and send money home to her family. "My mama sick," she said quietly, her smile fading for the first time that evening. Her voice took on a heavier tone, tinged with worry. "She have problem with heart. Need medicine every day. Very expensive. I take care her. I take care my brother, my sister. I only one workin' family." Hal felt a deep pang of sympathy. Here was this young woman, working hard in a tourist bar to support her family, putting herself through school despite obvious financial struggles, and still managing to smile and be kind to strangers. It reminded him of the work ethic he'd once prided himself on, the long hours at the auto shop, the sacrifices he'd made to build something from nothing. "That must be really hard," Hal said softly. "You're a good daughter." Sudha's eyes glistened slightly, as if she were fighting back tears. "Thank you, Papa Hal. Not many people understand. They think bar girl bad, but I just try help family." Before he left that night, Sudha asked for his phone number. "You come back, yes? I like talk you, Papa Hal. You different from other customer. You listen. You kind." He gave it to her without hesitation, typing his number into her phone while she watched with a satisfied smile. Walking back to his apartment that night, Hal felt something he hadn't felt in years, a connection. Not just attraction, though he couldn't deny he found her beautiful, but something deeper. She had listened to him. She had seemed genuinely interested, and she had made him feel like he mattered. Over the next 2 weeks, Sudha became a constant presence in Hal's life. She texted him every morning, simple messages like, "Good morning, Papa. You eat breakfast?" Or, "How you sleep? Good dream?" Or, "Today hot. You drink water." The attention was intoxicating. Back in Tucson, Hal would go days without a meaningful conversation. His phone would sit silent on the kitchen counter. No one called, no one texted. The loneliness had become so familiar he'd stopped noticing it. But here, this beautiful young woman seemed genuinely interested in his well-being, checking on him throughout the day like he was someone worth caring about. He returned to Blue Lagoon several times, always greeted by Sudha's enthusiastic wave and bright smile. She would light up when she saw him walk in, sometimes abandoning whatever she was doing to rush over and greet him. She would sit with him for hours, sometimes neglecting other customers, and they would talk about everything and nothing. She told him about her dreams of opening a small guest house someday, a place where tourists could experience real Thai culture. He shared memories of running the auto shop, the satisfaction of fixing something broken and making it whole again. She told him about her love of Thai food, especially somtam, the spicy papaya salad from her region. He admitted he struggled with spicy dishes, and she teased him gently, promising to teach him how to handle the heat. One evening, after the bar closed around 2 in the morning, Sudha suggested they go get food together. The streets of Pattaya were still alive with activity, late-night revelers stumbling between bars, street vendors still cooking despite the hour, stray dogs wandering in search of scraps. They walked to a late-night street vendor on a side street, away from the tourist areas. The setup was simple: a cart with a charcoal grill, plastic tables and chairs on the sidewalk, a single fluorescent bulb providing light. An older Thai woman worked the grill, barely looking up as Sudha ordered in rapid Thai. Sudha ordered somtam spicy papaya salad and grilled chicken, along with sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves. She insisted on teaching Hal how to eat with his hands, demonstrating how to take a small ball of sticky rice, press it between his fingers, and use it to scoop up pieces of chicken or salad. "Like this, Papa. You try," she encouraged, laughing when he fumbled with the sticky rice, which clung to his fingers in a way that felt both messy and oddly satisfying. "This is harder than it looks," Hal said, laughing at himself. "You so funny, Papa Hal," she said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. But you try. That important. You good man. I can see. You have good heart. Hal felt something shift inside him as he watched her laugh. This wasn't just a bartender being friendly to a customer. This felt real. The way she looked at him, the way she touched his arm when she laughed, the way she seemed genuinely happy in his company, it all felt authentic. By the end of the month, Suda was spending her days off with him. They went to Jomtien Beach, a quieter stretch of sand south of Pattaya's main beach, where they rented chairs under an umbrella and watched the waves. They visited Wat Phra Yai, the temple with the giant golden Buddha statue overlooking the city, where Suda showed him how to make merit by lighting incense and saying a prayer. They explored night markets together, wandering through stalls, selling everything from counterfeit designer bags to fried insects, with Suda acting as his guide and translator. She held his hand in public, something that made Hal acutely aware of the age difference but also deeply proud. He noticed other expats watching them, some with knowing smiles, others with barely concealed judgment. He didn't care. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had something other men wanted. One afternoon, Hal met two other American retirees at a coffee shop near his apartment. Both were in their 60s and had been living in Pattaya for years. Dennis was a gray-haired former accountant from California, lean and tan from years in the Thai Sunday. Frank was heavyset, from Florida, with a booming voice and a perpetual sunburn. They struck up a conversation, and eventually Dennis asked, "You seeing someone?" Hal tried to keep his tone casual, but he couldn't hide the pride in his voice. "Yeah, a girl I met at one of the bars." Dennis and Frank exchanged a glance, a look that Hal couldn't quite read but didn't like. "How old?" Dennis asked. 22. Frank whistled low, shaking his head. "Jesus, Hal, be careful, man. I've seen this play out 100 times. Hell, 1,000 times. "It's not like that," Hal said, immediately defensive. "She's different. She's going to school. She's got goals. She's not just some bar girl." Dennis leaned forward, his expression serious, almost fatherly. "Listen, I'm not judging. We've all been there, but you need to understand how things work here. These girls are working. Doesn't matter if they're behind a bar or sitting with you at dinner. They're always working. It's a job. You're the customer." "You don't know her," Hal said, his jaw tightening. "Maybe not," Frank said, his tone softening slightly. "But we've been here long enough to know the pattern. They're sweet, they're attentive, they make you feel like $1,000,000. Then they start asking for money. Small amounts at first, then bigger. Then suddenly you're buying a house or a car or sending money to a sick relative you've never met. And one day, poof, she's gone." "That's not what's happening," Hal insisted. "Just take it slow," Dennis said. "Don't do anything stupid like buying property or getting married too fast. Protect yourself." Hal left the coffee shop feeling irritated and defensive. What did they know? They were jaded, cynical men who couldn't imagine that someone might genuinely care about him. Suda wasn't like the girls they were talking about. She was different. She had to be. That evening, he told Suda about the conversation, expecting her to be hurt or offended. Instead, she just smiled sadly, her eyes filled with understanding rather than anger. "They not understand, Papa. They not know me. They not know you." She took his hand, holding it gently between both of hers. "I not care you have money or not. I care you good heart. You kind. You listen me. That more important than money." It was exactly what Hal needed to hear. He pulled her close, feeling the warmth of her body against his, and allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had found something real. 2 months after they met, Suda moved into Hal's apartment. It happened naturally, or at least it seemed that way to Hal. She had been spending more and more nights there, leaving a toothbrush in the bathroom, then a change of clothes, then more clothes. One evening, as they lay in bed together, with the fan rotating slowly overhead and the sounds of Pattaya filtering through the window, she casually mentioned that her roommate was moving out and she couldn't afford the rent alone. "How much is the rent?" Hal asked. 7,000 baht, she said quietly. "Not too much, but I also send money home and have school fees. I not can pay everything." Hal did the quick calculation. 7,000 baht was about $210. Nothing, really. And the idea of her struggling alone in some cheap apartment when he had plenty of space felt wrong. "Why don't you just stay here?" he offered. "I've got plenty of space." She looked at him with wide eyes, as if the suggestion was beyond anything she'd hoped for. "Really? You sure? You not think I too much trouble?" Of course not. I like having you around. Honestly, the place feels empty when you're not here. She hugged him tightly, pressing her face against his chest. You best man I ever meet, Papa. You have such good heart. I so lucky. Having Suda in his apartment transformed Hal's daily life in ways he hadn't anticipated. She cooked Thai meals for him, fragrant curries, stir-fried vegetables with holy basil, spicy soups that made his nose run but tasted incredible. She cleaned the apartment, reorganizing his kitchen and bathroom with an efficiency he hadn't possessed in years. She did his laundry, folding his clothes with care. She greeted him with affection every time he came home from his morning walks or afternoon errands, wrapping her arms around him and asking about his day. It felt like a partnership, like the kind of domestic comfort he'd been missing for years. It felt like a real relationship, but there were signs, small ones, that Hal chose to overlook. Suda began asking for money more frequently. At first, it was small amounts, 2,000 baht here, 3,000 there. She needed to pay for textbooks, she said, or her mother needed medicine, or her younger brother's school fees were overdue. Hal never questioned it. 2,000 baht was less than $60. 3,000 was 90. He could afford it easily, and the gratitude she showed made it feel worthwhile. Then the request grew larger. One evening in early May, about 3 months after they'd met, Suda sat him down at the small dining table in the apartment. Her expression was serious, almost sad, and Hal's heart immediately sank. "What's wrong?" he asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Papa, I need talk you something important, something I very scared to say. You can tell me anything." She took a deep breath, her eyes beginning to water. "My mama, she very sick, more sick than before. Hospitals say she need operation. Big operation, cost 80,000 baht. Hal did the quick mental math, about $2,400. It was a significant amount, but not devastating, not compared to what he had. "What kind of operation?" "Her heart," Suda said, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Doctors say if she not do, she maybe die. 6 months, maybe 1 year. They not know." The desperation in Suda's voice was palpable. More tears fell, and she covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Hal felt his chest tighten with empathy and something deeper, a need to protect her, to fix this problem, to be the hero she seemed to think he was. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll help." Suda's face lit up with relief. She stood up from the table and threw her arms around him, sobbing against his shoulder. "Thank you, Papa. Thank you so much. I pay you back. I promise. When I finish school, I get good job, I pay you back everything." "You don't have to pay me back," Hal said, stroking her hair. "Family is important. I understand that." He transferred the money the next day through a Bangkok bank branch, watching as the teller processed the transaction. 80,000 baht left his account, and Suda held his hand the entire time, squeezing it gratefully. A week later, Suda showed him photos on her phone, her mother in a hospital bed, looking frail but smiling weakly at the camera. There were images of medical equipment, IV drips, hospital bracelets. Hal felt validated. This was real. He wasn't being foolish. He was making a genuine difference in her life and her family's life. But the requests didn't stop. Over the next 3 months, Suda asked for money for her brother's tuition, 15,000 baht. For repairs to her family's house after heavy rains damaged the roof, 20,000 baht. For a motorbike so she could visit her family more easily without taking expensive buses, 35,000 baht. Each time, Suda presented the request with tears, with gratitude, with promises to pay him back. Each time, Hal said yes. How could he not? She was living with him. She took care of him. She made him feel loved and needed. What was money compared to that? Hal's savings account, which had held $230,000 when he arrived in Thailand, began to shrink at an alarming rate. By July, he had closer to $180,000 left. He told himself it was fine. He was still comfortable. He could still afford his lifestyle. And besides, he was investing in their future together. Still, he didn't question it. She loved him. She told him so every day. And love, he believed, required sacrifice. Real love meant being there when someone needed you, meant putting their needs alongside your own. That's what partners did. That's what families did. And Suda, whether he admitted it to himself or not, had become his family. In late June, 4 months after they met, Suda brought up the subject of marriage. They were lying in bed one evening, the fan overhead rotating slowly, barely cutting through the humid air. The sounds of Pattaya's nightlife drifted through the open window, distant music, the occasional shout, the constant hum of motorbikes. Sudha was quiet, unusually so, staring at the ceiling with an expression Hal couldn't quite read. "What's wrong?" he asked, turning onto his side to face her. She hesitated, biting her lower lip, then turned to face him. "Papa, I need to ask you something, but I'm scared." "You can ask me anything, you know that." She took a deep breath, her eyes searching his face. "You love me?" "Of course I do." "Then, why we not marry?" The question caught Hal completely off guard. Marriage hadn't been on his mind, not seriously, anyway. He cared about Sudha deeply, maybe even loved her, but he'd been burned twice before. Marriage felt like a door he wasn't sure he wanted to walk through again. It felt like a risk he'd already failed at multiple times. "I do love you," he said carefully, choosing his words. "But marriage is a big step. It's complicated." Sudha's eyes immediately filled with tears. "You think I'm not good enough?" "No, that's not—" "I know," she interrupted, her voice cracking with emotion. "I know I young. I know I not beautiful like American girl. I know I just poor girl from Eisen. But I love you, Papa. I take care you. I give you good life. I not want your money. I just want you." Hal felt a surge of guilt crash over him. "You are beautiful, and you do take care of me. It's not about that." "Then what?" she asked, sitting up and pulling her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "You not want marry me because I Thai? Because I work in bar before?" "No, of course not. I don't care about any of that." "Then why?" Her voice rose, becoming almost desperate. "In Thailand, if girl not marry, people think she not good. They think man not serious. They think maybe she prostitute. I want people know you serious about me. I want my family know. I want everyone know." Hal reached out and touched her shoulder, feeling the tension in her body. The idea of her feeling ashamed or insecure because of him was unbearable. He thought about his life back in Arizona, the loneliness, the emptiness, the feeling that nothing he did mattered. And here was this woman who wanted to marry him, who wanted to build a life with him. "Okay," he said quietly, "let's get married." Sudha's face transformed instantly. The tears stopped, replaced by a brilliant smile. She threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. "Really? You mean, you not joking?" "Yes, I mean it. I want to marry you." She kissed him deeply, then pulled back with excitement dancing in her eyes. "We do Thai way, yes? Traditional ceremony? I want my family see. I want everyone know you my husband." "Whatever you want," Hal said, caught up in her enthusiasm. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at a temple near Sudha's family village in Khon Kaen province. Hal paid for everything: the ceremony itself, the traditional offerings to the monks, the feast for the guests, the flowers, the photographer. The total came to around 120,000 baht, roughly $3,600. It felt like a lot, but Sudha insisted it was necessary to do things properly, to show respect to her family and the community. Hal didn't argue. He wanted her to be happy. He wanted her family to accept him. The ceremony was beautiful in its own way. Hal wore a traditional Thai silk shirt that Sudha had picked out for him. She wore a stunning Thai wedding dress in gold and red, her hair elaborately styled and adorned with flowers. Monks chanted blessings in Pali, a language Hal didn't understand but found hypnotic. There was a ritual where Sudha's parents symbolically gave her to Hal, a moment that felt both ancient and deeply meaningful. Sudha's family, a collection of aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews, and neighbors from the village, welcomed him warmly. They didn't speak English, and Hal didn't speak Thai beyond basic greetings, but they smiled and shook his hand and patted him on the back. Her mother, supposedly recovering from her heart operation, looked healthier than Hal expected. She was energetic, moving around the ceremony venue, directing relatives, and laughing loudly. A small doubt flickered in Hal's mind, but he pushed it aside. Maybe the operation had been successful. Maybe she was just putting on a brave face for the wedding. After the ceremony, there was a feast tables laden with Thai dishes, from spicy salads to grilled meats to sticky rice to fresh fruit. There was beer and whiskey, and the celebration went late into the night. Hal felt overwhelmed by the attention, by the music and dancing, by the sheer number of people, but he also felt accepted. These people had welcomed him, a stranger from another country, into their family. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Suda pulled him aside, away from the crowd, into a quiet corner of the venue. Her expression became serious once more, the joy of the celebration fading into something more contemplative. "Papa, I want to ask you one more thing." "What is it?" "I want we have house, our house, together." Hal's chest swelled with emotion. A house, a permanent home, a symbol of their commitment to each other. It was everything he'd been dreaming of since arriving in Thailand, a place that was truly his, a life that was truly his. "Okay," he said, pulling her close. "Let's find a house." Finding the house took less than 2 weeks. Suda insisted they look near her family's village in Udon Thani province, about an hour north of Khon Kaen. She argued it would be cheaper than Pattaya, quieter, and closer to her family so they could help if needed. Hal agreed. He liked the idea of a slower pace of life, away from the chaos and noise of the city. He imagined peaceful mornings, walks through rice fields, evenings sitting on a porch watching the sunset. The house they found was modest but charming, a single-story structure with 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a tiled living area, and a covered porch. It sat on approximately a quarter-acre of land surrounded by rice fields, with a view of distant mountains. There was a small garden area where Suda said she could plant vegetables and flowers. The neighborhood was quiet, just a handful of other houses scattered along a dirt road. The asking price was 1,200,000 baht, roughly $36,000. It was far less than property in Pattaya or any major city would cost. To Hal, it seemed like an incredible deal. But there was a problem, one that Suda explained carefully as they sat in a small local restaurant after viewing the property. "Papa, in Thailand, foreigner cannot own land. Only Thai people. Government law." Hal frowned, setting down his beer. "What do you mean? Thai law say foreigner can own condo, but not land, not house on land. They worry foreigner buy too much land in Thailand." Hal had heard about this restriction in expat forums, but he hadn't given it much thought because he hadn't planned on buying property so soon. "So, what do? "We put house in my name," Suda said simply, as if it were the most obvious solution. "But our house, you and me, together. What mine is yours, what yours is mine. We married now, same. Hal hesitated. Putting the house entirely in her name felt risky, even to him. Something in the back of his mind, perhaps the memory of Dennis and Frank's warnings, told him to be cautious. "Are you sure that's okay?" he asked. Suda reached across the table and took both of his hands in hers, her eyes wide and sincere. "Papa, your wife now. I not going anywhere. You, my husband. I love you. Why you not trust me?" The question stung because it implied a lack of faith in their relationship. And what choice did he have? Thai law was clear. Foreigners couldn't own land. If he wanted a house, it had to be in a Thai name. And she was his wife. They were a team. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it." They met with the seller, signed the papers, and Hal transferred 1,200,000 baht from his account. The house became theirs, or rather, hers. The deed bore only Suda's name. Hal received nothing in writing, no contract, no agreement, just verbal promises and the trust of marriage. Moving into the house felt like the beginning of a new chapter. Suda decorated with bright fabrics and Buddhist statues she bought from the local market. She planted flowers in the small garden, jasmine and orchids that filled the air with sweet fragrance. She cooked elaborate meals in the outdoor kitchen, grilling fish and making curries from scratch. Hal spent his days reading on the porch, walking through the village, and learning basic Thai phrases from Suda's nieces and nephews who would visit and giggle at his pronunciation. For a few months, life was peaceful. Hal felt content in a way he'd never experienced before. This was retirement. This was the life he'd dreamed about. But the requests for money continued, growing more frequent and more desperate. Suda needed 15,000 baht to start a small business selling clothes at the local market. Then her brother's motorbike broke down and needed repairs, 8,000 baht. Then her mother needed another procedure. Something about complications from the first surgery, 30,000 baht. Then her cousin needed help with a business loan, or he'd lose his shop, 25,000 baht. Each time, Suda presented the request with tears and gratitude. Each time, Hal transferred the money. What else could he do? They were married. This was his family now. By October, Less than 8 months after arriving in Thailand, Hal had fewer than $50,000 left in his account. The realization hit him one morning as he checked his balance on his phone. He'd spent over $180,000. Gone. The panic set in slowly, like cold water rising. And then Sudha started talking about needing space. "I think maybe I go visit my family few days," she said one evening in late October. "You okay here alone?" "Sure," Hal said, trying not to show his confusion. "How long?" "Maybe 1 week, maybe more. I'm not sure." She left the next morning with 2 large bags, more than seemed necessary for a short visit. Hal felt uneasy but said nothing. She was his wife. She had every right to visit her family. But the week stretched into 2. Her texts became less frequent. Her phone calls stopped altogether. In early November, Hal's tourist visa was nearing expiration. He'd been in Thailand on a series of tourist visas, each requiring him to leave the country briefly and return to get a new stamp. It was a common practice among expats who hadn't yet obtained retirement visas. Hal had done it twice before without issue. This time, Sudha suggested he go to Vientiane, the capital of Laos, just across the Mekong River from Udon Thani. The trip was simple: take a bus to the border, cross into Laos, stay overnight, visit the Thai embassy, then return. "Easy trip, Papa," she said over the phone from her family's village. "You go 2-3 day, come back, everything okay. I meet you at house." Hal didn't think much of it. He booked a bus ticket, packed a small bag, and made the journey. The trip to Vientiane was uneventful. He stayed in a cheap guest house near the Thai embassy, submitted his passport, and received his new visa without trouble. On the morning of his return, he felt a strange unease, a nagging sense that something wasn't right. He tried calling Sudha, no answer. He texted her, no response. By the time his bus crossed back into Thailand and arrived in Udon Thani, Hal's unease had turned into full-blown anxiety. He took a Song Thay, a shared pickup truck taxi to the village, watching the familiar landscape pass by with growing dread. When he arrived at the house in the early afternoon, his worst fears materialized before his eyes. The gate, which was usually open, was padlocked with a heavy chain. A hand-painted sign in Thai hung from the fence. Hal couldn't read it, but a neighbor passing by on a motorbike stopped when he saw Hal standing there. "Kai Lu," the man said, gesturing to the house. What does that mean?" The neighbor switched to broken English. "Sold. Lady sell house. 2 day ago. New family come soon." Hal's legs nearly gave out beneath him. "What? This is my house? I paid for this." The neighbor shook his head sympathetically but firmly. "Lady sell. She signed paper. Her house. Her name." Hal stumbled back, his vision blurring. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and tried calling Sudha again. This time, a recorded message played in Thai. He asked the neighbor to translate. "Number not service," the man said. "Disconnect." Hal stood there, in the driveway of the house he'd purchased, and felt his entire world collapse around him. Everything, the house, the money, the marriage, the dream was gone. Hal went to the local police station in a state of shock, his hands still trembling. The small station was a single-story concrete building with a Thai flag hanging limply outside. The officer on duty was a young man in a brown uniform who spoke minimal English. Hal tried to explain what had happened, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. The officer listened politely, made notes, and finally delivered the devastating verdict through a combination of broken English and gestures. "How's her name? Her house. She can sell. Thai law. But I paid for it," Hal protested, his voice rising. "I gave her the money. Over 1 million baht." The officer shrugged with bureaucratic indifference. "You married?" "Yes." "Then this family problem, not police problem. You talk lawyer maybe. What about the bank account?" "She took everything." The officer checked his notes. "Account joint?" "Yes, but..." Another shrug. "If joint, both can use, not crime." Hal left the station in a daze, the afternoon heat pressing down on him like a physical weight. He called every contact he had, other expats he'd met briefly, a lawyer in Bangkok whose number he found online, even the American embassy in Bangkok. The message was the same everywhere. There was nothing he could do. The house was legally in Sudha's name. The bank account was joint. Under Thai law, she had every right to sell the property and withdraw the funds. He had no legal recourse, no contract, no proof of his contribution, no protection. He was, in every legal sense, powerless. Over the next week, Hal lived in a cheap guest house near the center of Udon Thani, spending his days trying to piece together what had happened. He spoke to neighbors who confirmed a young Thai man had been visiting the house frequently during Hal's absences. One elderly woman mentioned seeing Suda packing bags into a red pickup truck the day before Hal returned from Laos. Using the last of his savings, Hal hired a private investigator in Bangkok, a wiry man named Somchai, who charged 20,000 baht up front. Within 3 days, Somchai had answers. Suda had been seen in Bangkok, staying at a luxury hotel in the Sukhumvit area with a Thai man in his early 30s. Somchai showed Hal photos taken from a distance, Suda in designer clothes, wearing sunglasses, laughing as she walked arm in arm with the man. They looked like a couple on vacation. The investigator also found her social media account, which had been hidden from Hal. The profile showed a completely different life: photos at expensive restaurants, nightclubs, shopping malls, photos with the same young Thai man, tagged with heart emojis. Her relationship status said single. The most recent post, dated 2 days earlier, showed her at a rooftop bar overlooking Bangkok, the caption reading in Thai, "New life, new beginning." There was no mention of Hal, no wedding photos, no trace of their marriage. It was as if he had never existed. Hal Bennett now lives in a small rented studio apartment on the outskirts of Chiang Mai, 700 kilometers north of where his dream died. The studio is barely 30 square meters, a single room with a bathroom, a hot plate for cooking, and a narrow balcony overlooking a busy street. The rent is 6,000 baht a month, all he can afford on the partial pension he receives from Social Security. He'd applied for retirement too early, reducing his monthly payment to just over $1,000. In Chiang Mai, it's enough to survive, but not to live comfortably. His days are quiet and solitary. He wakes early, eats simple meals of rice and eggs, and walks to a nearby temple where he sits in the shade and watches monks go about their routines. The repetition comforts him. He doesn't talk much. The few expats he's met in Chiang Mai have heard fragments of the story, but Hal keeps most of it to himself. The shame is too heavy, the sense of betrayal too raw. He thinks about returning to America constantly, but what would he return to? He has no home there, no business, no family waiting for him. His savings are gone. He'd need to find work, but who would hire a 70-year-old former auto shop owner? He's trapped, a prisoner of his own mistakes. In the evenings, when the heat subsides and the city quiets down, Hal sometimes takes out his phone and scrolls through old photos, pictures of him and Suda at the beach, at the temple on their wedding day, standing in front of the house that was supposed to be their future. He wonders if any of it was real, if she ever felt anything for him at all, or if, from the very first moment she called him Papa Hal, it was all part of a carefully constructed performance. Most days, he believes it was the latter. Last week, Hal saw a young Western man at a coffee shop, probably in his 60s, sitting with a Thai woman who couldn't have been older than 25. They were holding hands. She was laughing at something, he said. The man looked happy, completely unaware of what might be coming. Hal wanted to walk over and warn him, to tell him to be careful, to protect himself, to not make the same mistakes. But he didn't. He just paid for his coffee and left. What would be the point? The man wouldn't listen. Hal wouldn't have listened either. "I thought she made me feel young again," Hal told a fellow expat recently over a cheap beer at a local bar. "But she only made me feel foolish." The expat nodded sympathetically, but said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Hal Bennett turns 70 next month. He will spend the day alone, as he does every day now, with nothing but his regrets and the quiet understanding that the retirement he'd dreamed of, the warmth, the companionship, the sense of belonging was never real. It was just another transaction, and he had paid far more than he could afford. If this story affected you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Love scams destroy lives every single day, and awareness is the first step toward prevention. These predators rely on isolation and shame to keep their victims silent. By sharing these stories, we break that silence. Stay safe, stay informed, and remember, if something feels too good to be true, it probably is. Thank you for watching.